So, have you ever heard of a band called the Velvet Sundown?
Is that totally human band that everyone's talking about with a killer a sort of country Americana indie?
Well, they're not quite human.
Oh, really?
Really, yeah. So,
Subterfuge. You say?
subterfuge, yeah. So, I think what we're going to do this week is we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about where this has come from, you know, what's going to happen now, and I guess
What the future holds.
what the future holds.
I mean,
yeah.
anytime you
So,
say AI, everybody automatically thinks Skynet.
Skynet,
you know.
yeah. This is the most benign use of like Skynet that I could
Nobody
possibly be.
Nobody thinks William Gibson. You know,
You have to, though. I mean, who doesn't?
His book Idoru, it features a totally AI Japanese pop star named Ryo Toei in the book, adored by millions. The Taylor Swift of that book, despite not actually existing as a person. So everybody thinks Skynet, nobody thinks Ryo Toei.
Wow. And yet, you know, Gibson is seen as being one of these folk who are prescient, very prescient. You know,
Extremely so.
Neuromancer talks about the internet before it was even a thing.
Absolutely.
So,
Invented cyberpunk.
yep, all that stuff, all that good stuff.
Absolutely.
And Neuromancer's currently being turned into a TV series for Apple Plus. So
So-
we'll see how that goes.
When we're talking AI dystopianism this week, we're going to be talking Ryo Toei and William Gibson and a bit less Terminator.
Yeah, well, let's talk about not the Terminator. Let's talk about the Velvet Sundown, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
So, you may have heard of them. If you've been in the news or seen the news recently, I
If you
guess
have any kind of feed on any kind
Yeah.
of website, yeah.
you'll have seen these four oddly vacant-looking gentlemen and a kind of strange, uncanny backdrop.
I mean, they're deliberately handsome,
Yeah.
in a very oddly rendered kind of way.
Very much so. So they basically exploded into the public consciousness about 3 weeks ago, shall we say?
Yeah.
And
This is in July of 2025. Future
yeah,
listeners,
yes, of course.
future dystopian listeners.
Yeah, so they became known to the world in June 2025. An alarm bell started ringing with folk pretty much immediately. Their music started to kind of filter into Discover Weekly playlists and Spotify Radio, which are the two biggest algorithmic playlists that we all have
hmm
on our Spotify, if you have Spotify, of course. And
Which increasingly people do not,
yes,
as a result of arms companies and things like that.
yeah. So it turns out they'd racked up a frankly ludicrous amount of plays in a very, very short amount of time.
Yeah.
When I first came across the news, which I think was last week, so this is the week of, I don't know, today's date is the 9th of July, so the week before that.
So, I mean, to be clear, you'll have heard about this, or if you followed the Needle Drop, you'll have heard about this. If you've basically any music blog, any music magazine has run a piece on this. We're going to try and do something that brings some new material to the table and fills in a lot of the blanks around this story. So I'm guessing it was one of those kind of articles that you saw.
Yeah, so it was a Music Radar article talking about this, basically asking if this band was AI. And at the time when I saw that, they had about 500,000 plays on Spotify. It's now 1.1 million.
Yeah.
And that's been over the course of the last week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, depending on, I guess, when I see that. I'm guessing I saw it about a week ago. It might have been 2 weeks ago. They are a band who has released 2 albums. One called Floating on Echoes on the 5th of June, 2025, and a second called Dust and Silence on 19th of June, which is like a week later.
So you can imagine those 9 days were really busy for the band, writing that new album, getting it recorded, getting it out, the PR, all that kind of stuff. They've been up to their eyeballs.
Imagine being so prolific.
Oh, wow.
Imagine being so
It's
prolific.
the new Beach Boys.
I remember when I first seen them on Spotify, they had the countdown timer for there's a new album coming out, which
Yeah.
is supposed to be coming out at the start of July. They're clearly an AI band, right? There is now no debate around that.
Yeah.
They've actually came out, or a spokesperson for the band, i.e. the person who created it. Yeah. It came out and said that it was created using AI.
Yeah.
So it's now very clear that this is what it is. There was, I think if you had ears, you could probably tell it was not real.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you there.
You will, I know. I was setting you up there a little bit. But, Spotify is yet to label them as an AI creation, whereas Deezer, of course, have. Deezer are probably the third most dominant streaming platform after Apple Music and Spotify, or Spotify and Apple Music, sorry. And yeah, they've got a lot less plays on other platforms than they do on Spotify for reasons that I'll kind of talk a little bit about later on. But yeah, so on July the 5th, which is just Saturday, which was a few days ago, that's when all was revealed. The pulled back the curtain. I say they, this person, a person.
The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, pulled
Yeah.
back a curtain and said, you know what? Yeah, this is totally AI, and what of it? Kind of, a bit blasé about it.
Yeah.
Which I think is quite interesting in and of itself.
Almost combative about it
Mhm.
in terms of like, that's what it's all about. It's about noising you up. It's about art being subversive, y'all.
Yeah. So they didn't really announce it via social media. They changed their bio on Spotify, essentially to say the Velvet Sundown is a synthetic music project guided by human creative direction and composed, voiced, and visualized with the support of artificial intelligence. Yeah, it's a really great joke. And you know what? That bio was definitely written by AI too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, the images are done by AI. I'm sure whatever passes for a video is done by AI. The music's clearly done by AI.
Yeah.
So it would only make sense to then.
All the images on social media, even of them playing quote unquote live, all fake. All
Yeah.
of it's fake. Fake. In the lead up to the revelation, of course, there was a lot of people protesting on social media about how abhorrent this is, and it is, I think, to a degree, fairly abhorrent.
It's a triggering subject.
Yeah. A possible interloper / co-conspirator / conspirator, guy called Andrew Frelon. By the way, Frelon is French for hornet. Interesting. He gave an interview to Rolling Stone about the band, and then a few days later denied he even had anything to do with the band. And
The band in IT had anything to do with them, but
Yeah.
then the band don't exist.
CBC News in Canada actually worked to verify who he was and actually spoke to him, but have since kept his identity secret, but were able to confirm that he is a US-born Canadian expert on web platform safety and policy issues. And he has extensive experience using generative AI. He actually tried to do something similar with a friend last year, and it clearly didn't work out. Or did it?
Yeah.
Who knows? Naturally, the whole internet was awash with all these opinions about how grotesque it is, and we'll come to those soon, but, those are the facts. This Andrew Frelon guy may or may not be involved. It's unclear. But what is fairly clear is that it is fake, and
Yet
that
very
seems
successful.
very, very successful.
So I think we can cut through the noise a wee bit because a lot of other channels have covered a lot of what we're saying here. There are questions that arise from this, and I think two of them are: how did we get here, and where are we going? So I think that's what we're going to try and pick apart, pull apart, parse this week on the show. And I think to begin with, we can't really speculate on the future of AI or the potential future of AI without looking at the history of AI in music. There's probably some learnings that can be taken from there. So allow me to take us on a short tour of the key moments in the history of AI in music, okay? It goes back a lot further than you would probably think. Do you know that in 1951, Alan Turing recorded the melody to 3 songs. One of them was God Save the King, with laboratory equipment. Alan Turing, I think, is seen by people who are experts in this field as with so many things, being underappreciated, not just in his time, but now as a pioneer, and also how influential he's been in this subject. Because what he did then, maybe is a tenuous link, but it does ultimately pave the way for synths and electronic music and everything that followed. In 1956, 5 years later, the first ever fully automated piece of music was written. It was called the Iliac Suite for String Quartet, and published in 1957. It was made by the Illinois Automatic Computer, aka the ILIAC, under the guidance of a guy called Lejarin Hiller. I don't know how to pronounce that first name. I've never seen it before. Believe it or not, John Cage knew that guy. John Cage had kind of helped lay some of the groundwork for the Iliac Suite. He did also meet the inventor. There's photos of them together. But John Cage had experimented at the time with randomized composition methods. That was in the early 50s. We've spoken about John Cage on a lot of stuff recently, including the No Wave sort of episode that we did.
Actually did very well on YouTube, that one so far.
Thank goodness. There was also a Greek composer called Yannis Xenakis. He developed a process he called stochastic music, where he based the compositions on mathematical formulae, and they were calculated by computer. So very conceptual, So each algorithm used for the Iliac represented a set of particular views about what the musical outcomes could or should be, and those were sometimes at odds. The fourth of 4 in the suite, or the fourth suite of the 4 suites in this tune, it's not very long, I think it's about 15 minutes, is the most unusual because it drew in things called Markov chains. This is all a bit technical, but it's a particular kind of probability method where the music was only based on the note that preceded it. And you can probably imagine that gets a little bit chaotic. It's got little or no ability for the computer to memorize an overarching theme, so it gets a little bit jazzy, shall we say. Hiller was also totally devoted to the purity of his experiment. He didn't want to edit what the computer came up with, so it does sound very awkward. That detail will be very interesting later on, because a lot of people do take a big hand in what the computer churns out. The day after its first performance, United Press described the 15-minute show as, quote, a suite composed by an electronic brain that was sponsored by Hiller and Leonard M. Isaacson, his co-curator. Quote, some people didn't dig the beat. That's a very 1950s way to put it.
Very much so.
They cited an audience member who compared the music to a barnyard, and another one who worried that, quote, it does away with the need for human composers. Prescient. Back in 1957 on the first performance, somebody clicked. Supposedly Hiller, quote, was totally despised by certain members of his faculty because he touched a nerve in a very deep way when it came to replacing musicians. Jump forward a bit, 1965, a guy called Ray Kurzweil took time off.
Still going.
Yeah, took time off from serving Rocco's Basilisk and trying to live forever to develop software that could identify and replicate musical patterns. That was actually a big step forward. Way forward in 1983, Yamaha develops Kansai Music System, and 6 years later publishes a paper on it. So, it developed in 83, but it wasn't really comfortable releasing the research until 6 years later, 1989. It's still extremely basic, but it was creating simple melodies from scratch. 1997, Experiments in Music Intelligence, also called the EMI, just a coincidence, I think, passes a Turing test. Do you know what a Turing test is?
I do, yes, but do you want to explain what a Turing test is?
Well, for the benefit of the audience, a Turing test is effectively the test applied to an AI whereby you as a human can't tell you're talking to an AI. You think you're talking to a human. And in this case, musically, you can't tell that the music was composed by an AI. So in 1997, Turing test was passed. It was basically EMI convincingly replicated a work in the style of Bach more closely than another human on a blind test. That system, by the way, Experiments in Music Intelligence, was later renamed Emily Howell by its inventor, David Cope. It kept advancing, and he kept building upon that system, and it would release a debut album in 2009. Mark, that's almost as long as your band's going to take to release a debut album.
Can you imagine?
The album's called From Darkness, Light, which
that's what the album's called. That's what the album's called.
So From Darkness, Light is actually, when you think about it, quite an ominous God delusion-y Book of Genesis reference in the title, when you consider that this is somebody sort of musing on having created artificial intelligence, Let's jump forward 13 years. 2010, the system Lamus, or Lamu, I'm not sure if that's maybe the pronunciation, based in Malaga University, produces completely original classical work, annotated in traditional style for all the constituent instruments. Between 2010 and 2015, work began on a thing called Juke Deck. That was a website. It actually launched in I think 2015, allowing people to enter prompts to create totally original and, crucially, royalty-free music clips. 2016, do you remember Daddy's Car?
Yeah.
Fuck, it feels like forever ago now. Daddy's Car was the first commercially available pop song released by the Sony CSL Research Centre. It was not fully automated, so we're harking back to that Hiller thing. Far Out magazine did some articles on this. Far Out's actually a really good resource for this kind of subject. They say the system called Flow Machines was used to analyse a database of songs and then create a similar composition by following a specific musical style. While it did that, the track relied on French composer Benoit Carr, who arranged the song and wrote the lyrics. So it wasn't a completely hands-free process there. What the computer was churning out, he was chopping into shape and he was influencing. Also in 2016, staff at Sony Computer Science Laboratories in Paris thought it would be interesting to see if another machine could convincingly copy Bach. To find out, they developed a neural network called Deep Bach. It was trained using a dataset of 352 Bach cantatas. that were all transposed to other keys, meaning that it ended up with a set of 2,503. Deep Bach was able to produce its own harmonies for alto, tenor, and bass in the style of Bach when given a soprano melody. So when it was given a cue, it was able to work around that. Most importantly, Deep Bach's compositions even fooled people, so passed another Turing test. The team asked more than 1,600 people, and a quarter of that 1,600, so 400 people, were professional musicians or music students. And they listened to 2 distinct harmonies of the same melody, and more than half of the listeners attributed the Deep Bach harmonies to Bach. Funnily enough, though, the actual Bach was correctly identified at a higher rate of 75%. So there was still a discrepancy, but it was getting very, very close. 2017 to 2018, AIVA Technologies is one of the leading startups in the field of AI music composition. AIVA is artificial intelligence virtual artist. They taught it. It was trained how to compose classical music. The first album, again, biblical reference, was called Genesis.
I wish I had thought of that for my first album.
Yeah, as well as loads of other single tracks. It became the first ever AI to officially acquire worldwide status of composer. So it was registered under France and Luxembourg's Authors' Rights Society, which is SACEM. So it has writers' rights. Revenue goes to whoever controls it. Asked why they chose classical music, AIVA Technologies explained that 1, it is a predominant style used in movies, games, commercials, and trailer soundtracks, so there's clearly a financial incentive there. And 2, all of the partitions we use to train AVA are copyright expired. So the music, the classical music, they weren't infringing on copyright by using this data set, which is something a lot of other people, like OpenAI, have been far less scrupulous about. However, even though the music that Ava listens to isn't copyrighted, Ava's music, as we mentioned, is copyrighted. So that's interesting. And according to them, their compositions have also passed the Turing test. Now, Ava would come back into the story in 2018. Now, what you'll notice is that the periods between my updates here start to reduce. September of 2018, a track called I Am AI is released by Threatin. Now, Threatin was a human pop musician, already had a music career. She originally had received a large commission from YouTube, of all people, regarding they wanted her to make some virtual reality videos, and she used part of that to create 2 pieces of this AI music. Threatin's website says, I Am AI is the first album by a solo artist composed and produced with artificial intelligence. Threatin used a combination of tools, including IBM's Watson Beat, Ava, Ampere, and Google's Magenta. In all cases, AI software composed the notation and produced the instrumentation, where Threatin arranged the compositions and wrote the vocal melodies and lyrics. There was also a producer, Ethan Carlson, who did the vocal production and did mixing and mastering. So again, not a completely start-to-finish AI process. AI working in tandem with at least a couple of other people there. 2020, The Guardian ran quite a well-known article on OpenAI's Jukebox project, which allowed people to input musical cues to generate songs in the style of, so, I don't know, emo metal. You could write that and it would kick something out. That relied on data built on 1.2 million songs. So that's in 2020. Data set of 1.2 million songs, scraped from the internet. Those would have been copyrighted. This is where a lot of the AI tension arises, shall we say.
Current tension.
Yeah, because they're using stuff that is copyrighted, but it's absolutely not attributed. Even when it's, because I mean, for example, Daddy's Car sounded unbelievable like the Beatles. It was obvious that the Beatles had been one of the main data sets in that. We spoke about this earlier on. 1.2 million songs used by OpenAI for Jukebox. That 1.2 million songs will be culturally biased. It just will be culturally biased. I mean, OpenAI, American company, we mentioned a lot of stuff we're going to talk about today sounds like Nickelback, and all that kind of oeuvre of like new post-grunge butt rock, yeah, butt rock and yacht rock. Like that is clearly a disproportionate part of the data set that has been used to train these AI. Country, I would imagine, as well. Whereas if you made that in Bangladesh, I'm sure it would sound different. If you made it in the UK, where like Brit rock and stuff like that were more predominant, I'm sure it would sound different. But so Jukebox, you could just go on, put in a prompt, it would kick something out. you probably, if you've ever used it or if you've heard anything that came out of it, the vocals sounded kind of glitchy, and they also often sounded weirdly underwater. And that's because that was a start to finish process. There was no mastering, there was no engineer remixing it, that kind of thing. And it struggled. The tech was at its limits at that point. You do see the iterative process in action there. You know, certain vocal styles, for example, are much harder to get past the uncanny valley. So you would maybe get a more convincing butt rock song or country song, but it would be harder to, for example, do prog rock, Led Zeppelin, or blues, like proper blues, you know, with tons of character, or Motown or something like that. Well,
Interesting observation. Now, this is just, I'm just joining these dots up. Both the butt rock and the country /country rock / bro country, whatever,
yeah,
both use the closed vowel in their singing style.
Eggy
And that kind of, you know, that,
Eggy AI.
Yeah, which, yeah, that's probably, if there's a dearth of that, dearth's not the word, that means
It's a lack of.
If there's a deluge of that
Deluge
out there, then yeah, I think
deluge of butts.
deluge of butts, deluge of countries.
So in 2023, Anna, Indiana hits the scene with a track called Betrayed by This Town. So, and this is a full song and video. The song title, first off, really struck me, Betrayed by This Town. It's a little bit dark as a theme. I think that's something that's quite consistent with AI, where you ask it to kick something out, you know, artwork, stories, things like that. And sometimes
That's directed.
it could be a little bit sinister. Well, we'll see. Anyway, this was the first under the Anna Indiana banner. It was everything: the key, the tempo, the chord progression, the melody notes, the rhythm, the lyrics, heart image singing and moving. It's all auto-generated, start to finish. Some of the lyrics in it express this is their description: express feelings of betrayal by the town, describing broken dreams, shattered hopes, and silent screams. Again, when it's an oddly dark first take for something. I mean, the artist is depicted as this, you know, indeterminate age, but clearly young, disturbingly young in her depiction. In fact, you know, disturbingly idealized and, you know, dough-faced and stuff like that. And that's a very dark theme. Another part of their press release is Anna Indiana sings about the town's negative impact, calling for tearing it down and expressing a sense of destiny and loss. The song touches on themes of loneliness, reflection on favourite spots, painted smiles, lies, and the struggle to overcome the challenges imposed by the town, which all sounds very AI generated in and of itself, but also sounds like a prompt that could have been put in the first place. So yeah, Betrayed by This Town, it's a piece of shit, but it's also a very dark sentiment, and I found that a little bit odd and disconcerting. As I say, you know, she's angelic, there's a conservative sweater, sensible hair, sugary voice, yet this kind of dark sentiment kicking about. That's a little bit Also, I noticed on one of the posts, the track, as part of its visual, has flashes of, you know, Megan from the film Megan, with a giant sword just flashing up, a bit like if you've ever watched Fight Club. They flash up these subliminal dick pics during the film. So it's got Megan with a sword, and at the ending there's an ending card that says, "Remember, you will own nothing and you will be happy hearing my songs forever."
I mean, that probably going to be the future, to be honest.
So dystopians can be forgiven, but I do think there's maybe a grim sense of humour at play there. You're saying it's deliberate. I get the feeling that the people that posted that and put that together were kind of in on the joke a little bit. It is interesting.
It's incongruous, isn't it?
It is a bit, yeah. And also, since that track, the other tracks have been posted on a dedicated channel to Anna Indiana, and even though they've got loads of releases now, the views are encouragingly low, let's say, despite all the press coverage. So some of the videos are sitting about 100, 110 plays.
We do better than that.
Yeah, totally.
Not by much.
2023, November the same year, a Beatles tune surfaces, Now and Then. We're talking about different applications of AI here. This one's a little bit less nefarious, depending on your take. This originally began as a project in 1994 with the discovery of a John Lennon tape that he'd originally recorded in New York in 1977, I believe. The tape was him playing piano and voice with this track Now and Then. The voice and the keys could not be effectively separated. And the technology of the day struggled. It couldn't do it. And so McCartney, Starr, and Harrison had gone in to try and record this and just couldn't get it to work. Because when you're trying to lift the voice in the mix, the piano's coming up with it. It was beyond their means at that point. And so it was left unfinished. When Peter Jackson started working on Get Back, very good film series about Beatles, I'm sure you've heard of or seen, his team invested in AI tech at the same time that helped to separate the piano and reconstruct John Lennon's voice, and that's where that song came from. Finally, they had the piano, which could be reperformed, and John's voice, and it does sound very, very, very accurately like John's voice, including nuance, albeit they've got an enormous data set of John Lennon's voice to draw from. So 2023 deepfake sidebar as well here. It was a busy year. The Beatles experience is interesting because in 23, Heart on My Sleeve emerged. It was created by a user called Ghostwriter977, and it used Drake and The Weeknd's voice in a similar way to create a new song that actually was submitted for Grammy consideration before it was later removed from platforms via legal action by Universal. So the deepfakes thing started to become a bit of an issue. 2024, May, Randy Travis releases a track called Where That Came From. You ever heard of Randy Travis?
Name doesn't ring a bell.
Very celebrated, much older country star. This is actually quite a nice use of it. So Randy Travis had a very severe stroke in 2013 that left him unable to sing, but he's been playing ever since. And they had like touring singers working with him. But his voice was extracted from past recordings and synthesized in this one new single in his behalf. And there's a music video that goes along with the song and actually includes this really emotional footage of his reaction to his own voice singing this song of his composition in the studio. It's quite an interesting use of AI. It is. It's quite compelling. Then it gets interesting. Now, audiences in the West, shall we say, might not be familiar with this, but things kick off in India in 2025. Aishan and Ruh, R-U-H, come on the scene. So let's get a wee bit dystopian here. India Today, which is effectively a media site, a news site, right, excitedly report on the arrival of Aishan, an Indian-based AI pop star, start to finish AI pop star, that is, created by the India Today group, ITG. So they say, Aishan represents the future of entertainment, blending artificial intelligence with music to create a unique digital sensation. With Aishan, ITG takes another bold step in AI-driven creativity, revolutionizing the music industry and redefining the future of pop culture in India. Try not to shudder there. Aishan is, quote, a 22-year-old from Delhi with roots in Bareilly and Jodhpur who has been creating music since he was 17, blending indie acoustic, pop, and Ed Sheeran vibes. Inspired by new people and sounds, his lyrics reflect his thoughts and experiences. An ambivert, he connects with fans but values his quiet moments. A Nainital soul, he's drawn to the mountains while also being a dog lover, bike enthusiast, sneakerhead, and food explorer, all with a classic old money style. The fucking depth of the bullshit character. And the thing is, that is actually key to that product, because Aishan is just this computer-generated, computer-animated pop project, you know, unfeasibly good-looking, but then not ridiculous, like realistically attainable, if you know what I mean. But they've built so much of a backstory based on clearly research criteria. What do young girls want? They want, you know, a guy who's 22, that's the optimal age, been playing music since he was 17. He's from Delhi, which is, you know, seen as it's this kind of city, it's quite progressive, but he's got roots here, so he's got authenticity. I mean, they've built the brand around optimization. It's quite a pernicious thing in and of itself. And true enough, he was followed by a counterpart, Ruh, who is, quote, a free-spirited character with a bohemian vibe. Ruh was the first one that I'm aware of to be labelled an A-pop star. Now, this is a term that I think you're going to see more and more often, A-pop. A bit like K-pop and J-pop, but it's AI pop. And she is, quote, a harmonious mixture of artificial intelligence with human interventions to create music. It could mean lyrics penned by a human being sung by an AI-driven singer, visually an amalgamation of real and AI-generated images. Rue is described as, quote, at 24, this Delhi native, Delhi again, is free-spirited, independent, and all about living life to the fullest. With an extroverted and vibrant personality, Rue embraces adventure and travel, exploring new cultures with a hippie vibe. Driven by personal freedom, self-expression, and individuality, she inspires others to live authentically and pursue their passions without the fear of judgment, which is about 20 of the most empty words I've ever read in any sentence. The Rue video is a sort of, for the song, is a kind of post-Instagram procession of just depressingly aspirational living. You know, traveling around the world, jet setting, like an amalgamation of kind of American reality stars and Instagram, you know, trending videos and things like that. Albeit it's rendered in frankly astonishing AI when you consider in it the hair fluttering and also the scenes of flames and stuff. Just this is again the iterative process in action, the sheer processing power. You know, that kind of I can't remember the law. Is it about processor size versus computing power? Moore's law, that's the one. But you really see it in action here. This is all just a matter of capacity, and it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. You know, so whilst the you know the concept of those two Indian acts already existed. The technology existed as well. I think the crossover of the media group in that case is particularly interesting, the India Today group. That is a huge, I mean, India is an enormous country, right? Massively influential country. That is like News International to me, creating a pop star and then throwing their weight behind it to try and sell it and get it on things, you know. I'm sure it's been in a number of Bollywood films. Same year, 2025, May, we're coming up to the present here, UK-based tech startup Moth released a track called Recurse in collaboration with the artist Isla. This is the world's first commercially available song created using quantum-powered generative AI. We can disagree on how authentically quantum-powered it is or not, because quantum computing is something that's disputed at the moment. But using Moth's platform Archeo, based on quantum machine learning, called for the geeks quantum reservoir computing, this system was able to identify subtle, complex patterns in Ila's music that a conventional AI might miss. Now, what makes this different? Unlike generative AI tools like Suno or Udio, which we're going to talk about, Archeo doesn't create songs from scratch, and nor is it trained on vast quantities of music scraped from the web. They make the point often without consent, so it takes that sort of ethical thing out of the picture. Instead, it learns purely from small samples of a specific artist and just extrapolates on that using an extraordinarily larger processing power that the general AI can't really imitate. And it makes a new song. Isla says it feels very refreshing to use a technology that has been built to work with you, not simply replace you. It's funny to me that the quantum computing is turning out this music that sounds like avant-garde Bjork pop, while the regular AI is still synthesizing like crap country rock. Do you know what I mean? It's very, very high art, low art divide there in the quantum world. It's a fitting metaphor, I think. And then bringing us bang up to date, 2025, June, Timbaland signs the AI artist Tata to his label Stage Zero, which is designed to blend human creativity with AI-based sounds to forge new musical genres such as apop. There's that phrase again. Timbaland's got a lot to say, but on this he says, while we frequently discuss AI, I believe it's the only entity that embodies a genuine soul right now. It allows for the expression of true feelings, resulting in it coming out beautiful. Timbaland thinks that real music lacks soul, which there's a case to be made for, but he thinks the answer to that is to have things with no souls creating music, trying to replicate or imitate what it's like to have a soul.
Yeah. Trained
on music that was made with soul. In June 2025, a new band called the Velvet Sundown.
Yeah.
And so that brings us up to date. And it's an interesting journey because, as I mentioned, it's not all negative. There are moments in there. The guy had the stroke, the Beatles, all that kind of stuff, where you're like, oh, that's actually an amazing use of AI. That's a really interesting use of it. But then the India Today thing, I mean, is it possible to look at that and think that's not disturbing?
Yeah, I know it's that's could be a version of the future we're about to see, explode. We can speculate
I
that.
found a perspective, a guy called Yihao Chen. He's the founder of Itoka, ITOKA, which is a music company creating AI-generated songs. He was interviewed by Far Out magazine again in 2023. Some of his quotes are fascinating. So he says, the goal of this AI technology is not to replace human creativity, but to expand the territory or the boundaries of human creativity. In music, it looks at providing efficiencies. That's quite reassuring. But then he says, those people who are not willing to adapt and not willing to use this technology might suffer from the gap that we create between the people who are using data and those who are not using it, which is really quite ominous if you think about it.
Yeah, that's pretty scary. And I think it's easy for somebody to say that when they consider the fact that I'm creating this tool which will help musicians make music a much more easier fashion. But a lot of people are definitely not doing that.
No.
And you mentioned there about, the numbers and the cost and how much money could be made doing that. Well,
there's clear that, India Today is doing this as a massive venture.
Yeah.
For a reason.
And let's talk a little bit about the numbers for the band, the Velvet Sundown, because, if things keep going the way they're going, then they're going to be making some serious bank. So,
by the way, talking about making some serious bank, if you like this podcast.
Yeah, if you like this podcast, then please check out our Patreon, which is patreon.com.
Hit subscribe, first of all. There's a wee bell on the YouTube.
Yeah.
You should get a wee noise. We could use the Prince alarm for that, couldn't we?
We could.
You should subscribe on this, please, because we're putting out some pretty good stuff. But you can also subscribe to the podcast at the basic level.
Yep, which is £4 a month or whatever your equivalent local currency is. And that's at patreon.com/unsungpod. You get access to episodes a few days earlier. You get to talk to us directly, whether or not that's a plus or a minus. It's completely on you.
You get into the AAA group. You can influence the content of the episodes.
So yeah, patreon.com/unsungpod where you can sign up. So yeah, check it out.
It's a nominal fee. There is a higher fee. You can join the record club, which some people have this week, I notice, and we curate and buy music from artists and then send it to you based on your tastes.
Real artists,
yeah. And it means you're funding them, you're funding us. You're also getting yourself a little present once a month of music that you almost certainly wouldn't otherwise cross paths with. But that's if your money bags. That's 15 full quid, almost 3.2 coffees a month.
Yeah, so like I said, patreon.com/unsungpod.
But sorry, numbers,
yeah. So let's do some maths, right? So Spotify pays out $0.003. Spotify pays out between $0.003 and $0.005 per stream.
Ching ching.
Ching ching. So let's take 0.004 to be the average, right? Because it's right bang in the middle. If you times that by 1 million, and I will say it again that the Velvet Sundown are currently getting 1.1 million plays per month on Spotify. If you times that by 1 million, you get about $4,000 a month. Or if you're in the UK like we are, you're going to be getting 2,943 quid a month, which gives you an annual salary of £35,323.92 per month, which is just below.
That would. Can I just check, just for people who are in bands, if you were in a real band and were a human, that would be split.
Be split 4 ways.
And also, if you were signed to a label and had a manager and all that shit, that would be vastly reduced again. The figures to make a basic working minimum wage by UK standards, let's say, it's something like 16 million streams a year.
Yep.
Or it used to be. It might even be more than that now. So it is important to keep that in perspective. The thing with the AI bands is there is no manager or band members or necessarily a label to divide this up between. That is a much simpler revenue stream.
Yeah, the only thing you're paying money for is your subscription to Suno, probably.
Yeah.
You're paying for, playlist manipulation. And we've done a whole episode on playlist manipulation back in October 2023. You're paying for that. You're maybe paying for some Facebook ads or some Instagram ads or TikTok ads or whatever. And you might, I guess, if you're feeling particularly ballsy, maybe a publicist. Who's going to take you on, I guess, is the question there, right?
I think with them, they were definitely doing their own publicity.
Yeah. But, so the potential applications of that are really huge, right? So aside from being able to churn out music at an absurd rate with AI, and I say that with the, fully in the knowledge that if you're not a new artist just now, you're probably not aware of the fact that a lot of artists are encouraged to release a new song every 6 weeks to keep you alive in the algorithm, to keep you in people's attention span in people's purview. And that is not just the song goes onto your platforms, it's also creating all the social media content that goes around about that. So it's a hell of a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
So if an artist has been said you should release a new song every 6 to 8 weeks, imagine if you can release a new album every 6 to 8 weeks.
Every 9 days.
Yeah, every 9 days even. Yeah. So if we're already worried about the fact that AI is going to be increasing the wealth gap and taking away jobs, I mean, the cost implications of that are huge. Of an AI artist making £35,000 a year is insane, right? Absolutely insane. You would need a job. And you could do it multiple times. You could have like 10 going, 15, 20 going. Or you're paying for your subscription, you know what I mean, to get that to happen.
I would assume that if you got into that and you didn't have multiple going in multiple different genres, then you were a fool.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to assume that.
Yeah, once you've got the system and the infrastructure in there, you would surely just start to bulk it up.
Absolutely.
Bring people in, get a team, right? You're working on this project, you've got 10, and you literally end up with these farms farming out this stuff.
Mm-hmm. And you're paying bot farms or actual real quote unquote playlist listeners to juice that in the algorithm, which is how you end up going from 0 to 500,000.
Yeah.
And then get seen by the press and then go from 500,000 to 1 million over the course of like a month and a half, which is just crazy. There's no artist alive, I use the term alive pretty definitively there, that's able to achieve that with all the major label backing in the world, right? Well,
sentient is probably the word that we'll use
sentient,
going forward.
And let me just qualify that. I think if a label threw enough money at somebody, they would probably be okay with that. But I think even some of the most unscrupulous individuals right now that are actually managing artists and representing artists labels are probably not going to throw that much money at it because it starts to look pretty dodgy and people can smell that.
Yeah.
Questions of and I'm talking about authenticity there, right? So questions of authenticity aside, job replacement in AI is obviously a huge deal, right? Like I said, it's going to lead to the widening of the wealth gap, and it will push people out of work. And apparently now that now includes musicians. It could potentially include musicians, you know. I won't go through this huge list of how this is already happening. There are some examples. Duolingo cut 10% of their staff, replaced them with AI. Shopify, the CEO said that teams must demonstrate why they cannot get what they want done using AI, and they shouldn't be asking for more headcount and resources.
Which is just a mad system, like a mad, dehumanizing, like humiliating system.
Yeah.
Justify why you should exist as a role.
Yeah, and you know, BT are planning to cut 55,000 jobs. That's British Telecom for those who are not in the UK. They're planning to cut 55,000 jobs by 2030, with 10,000 of them being replaced by AI. So that's already happening. And it's not going to stop happening, right? The discussion around if there is an ethical use of AI is one that we could maybe table for another day. I personally think that is possible. And maybe we can have a discussion at some point about what that looks like. But right now, bands like the Velvet Sundown, for example, people that are creating that kind of thing, I would argue that's probably not ethical, you know? So,
I mean, the thing is, this isn't playing out uniformly across genres.
absolutely not, no.
There's an effect that I would probably refer to as the rising tide of AI.
The butt rock effect.
So different genres prioritize different elements, and put simply, some are harder to mimic or recreate authentically. There's the effect, the Uncanny Valley effect, that I'm sure most people are familiar with now. It still acts as a boundary in that respect. That's that thing where, you know, there's a graph you can draw, actually. That's where the valley part of it comes from. And it's like the closer you get to realistic, you get to a point where it's really problematic. If you remember, the Polar Express is used as a good example of that. Because when you were making like Dumbo cartoons, well, that's a bit racist. When you were making like Snow White cartoons and you weren't trying to be photorealistic, it was fine. And when you were making, you know, I don't know, Rio or all these like parrots, it's like cars, all that shit. But when you start trying to get almost photorealistic, there's a thing called the Uncanny Valley emerges, where the believability just tanks just shy of realism. And then Once you get by that technological hurdle, it completely picks up again, where actually you can now suddenly no longer tell if something's real or not. And we're getting close to that.
Yeah.
But the Uncanny Valley applies not just to images, not just to films, to animation, but it applies to all kinds of things. It applies to voice copying. It applies to press releases, like we spoke about. You know, it applies to music in this case. And I will say, this is not me saying that, you know, some genres are inherently better or worse, although they are. So I guess I am saying that. But in this context, I'm not. Some are certainly more technically or stylistically, quote unquote, sophisticated, which is a barrier for AI in its current state, in its current form. You know, some genres reward eccentricity over conformity. We spoke about this on the anti-rock episode. You know, we spoke about it with regards to No Wave, to Frank Zappa, all these kind of bands, Einstürzender and all these kind of bands, you know. And I'm not saying AI could convincingly, let's say, take ambient music, which is one of the ones that I think was one of the first pieces to fall on the board. It could not make any ambient music. I'm not saying that Stars of the Lid would now be replaceable by AI. But AI can make much more convincing ambient music for the untrained ear than other genres. You know, all genres do have incredible nuance if you're really invested in them. But if you're not incredibly invested in them, some genres are easier to mimic than others. You know, not all offshoots, especially of genres, prioritize nuance. We're about to talk about one in relation to country, but especially modern offshoots. So let's look at some of these like sets here. So some genres that I would suggest prioritize tropiness. So we've spoken about this in the show before, genres that are all about rules, and part of the charm comes from observing and working within those rules. Punk rock, thrash metal, techno, country pop, there it is. Stoner rock. Stoner rock is a lot about tropes. A lot of it sounds very different, but there are certain boxes that need to be ticked. Folk music, to some extent. Tabloid post-rock, they will get a bit nuanced there. So we've spoken about this in the show before, the difference between broadsheet and tabloid post-rock. The post-rock that is a bunch of, 4 different chords, a bunch of tremolo guitar, we had delay pedal over it, and a bunch of bombastic drums. Actually, ultimately, is that quite easy to replicate? Well, I know to my chagrin that it is, because I get inundated, or certainly for a while get inundated by demos, with demos of bands doing exactly that by the numbers. Some genres that, let's say, prioritise delicate nuance and detail, so that would be stuff that's hard to replicate without sounding slick. So I would say folk music, especially kind of like your sort of indie folk, like Neil Young sort of branch of things, Janis Joplin even going into the bluesier stuff. Stoner rock, because it's a lot about tones. Now, stoner rock is very tropey, but also stoner rock is very much about the idiosyncrasy of the way it's recorded, the styles of it. Caius, an AI replicating Caius, it's so unconventional in the weird way, in the uncouth way it was done, that it's hard to imagine that. The AI would be much more likely to conform and go by normal studio standards. I mean, Caius is frankly too loud. The vocals are too quiet in the mix. The drums sound weird. It's like, but that's why we like it. Genres with aggressive vocals, or vocals that demand a lot of personality, so they would be hard to copy. So I would say metal, because it's hard to replicate. To some extent, there is a big caveat here. To some extent, it's hard to replicate many forms of metal. Punk, to some extent, it's hard to replicate truly aggressive punk vocals. Hardcore. I would also say Motown, because if you're an aficionado on soul or funk or Motown, it's all about the unbelievable character in those voices. That's what makes them special. I mean, in terms of the arrangement and the structure and the writing of the songs, I mean, goodness knows, a lot of these artists play literally the same song. There's multiple versions of Proud Mary and God knows what else, but it's about the delivery and the personality in it. And that is a hard thing to fake. Genres, on the flip side, that prioritise complexity. So this is a thing that maybe AI would find hard to do. Prog rock, IDM, intelligent dance music, more progressive stuff like the Bjorky type stuff we spoke about. Avant-garde pop, again, Bjork, was it Serpent with Feet, that kind of stuff, like really kind of cutting edge, Portishead, that sort of thing, or broadsheet post-rock. It's very hard to imagine an AI trying to replicate Godspeed You Black Emperor, for example, because it's so odd and eccentric and unorthodox in the way it goes about things in its current form. Genres that heavily feature modern digital production. So I want to put this one in because that stuff's easy to do, but it also works as a mask. So modern production, let's say like auto-tune, various in-the-box processes, commercial hip-hop, pop metal and emo metal. We spoke about a couple of acts, Mark. Hangover Carousel is a band that's doing really well on Spotify. A band as well called Bjorgamus, doing really well on that. You've got electropop. I want to put a category in here, and I'm sorry, it's going to be politically incorrect, but I want to qualify the term before everybody switches off. Kebab pop, kebab shop pop. That's not a racist slur. What I mean is, if you've ever gone for a late night chips and cheese or a kebab, that auto-tuned music that, first of all, is far too fucking loud for a food shop when you're trying to order. But that just, what is that music? There's always this channel on the TV, and you're like, what channel is that? Like, who's making this shit? This auto-tuned, schlonky, fucking electro garbage. That stuff is so unbelievably processed. That is the cheese strings. That is the Pringles of music. It's been squeezed through a machine. And that is actually a really, first of all, an easy thing to imitate because so much of the process is artificial anyway. But secondly, it also masks the human side of it. I mean, we've done examples in the show before. You got like even Katy Perry albums where the vocals were so heavily auto-tuned, they had no relation to the vocal that she sang in the first place. They were completely manipulated. Other ones, the one that we're going to come back to, country pop / bro country / country rap. Some names in that are worthy of note. The Devil Inside, Deviate, and Deshaun Williams. And then I would also say synthwave. Synthwave is one that for a long time, being electronic, not having vocals by and large, unless they're sampled vocals, is a very, very easy thing to mask the humanity in that. These satisfy a number of criteria that make it very easy to synthesize them without all that, I'd say talent. Like, you have to know how to use your computer, but what I mean is you don't need a band in a room doing a hell of a lot of writing and rehearsing. So AI tech is like a rising tide. First, it brushes and then gradually engulfs certain genres that have their low-hanging fruit. They're more susceptible, okay? But as it improves, and it does improve, it incessantly improves, and it will improve. That's what I mean. It's not an if, it's a when. It slowly rises to take over the next genre. This country pop, indie pop thing that we're talking about this week is only the latest one that it's managed to get up to speed with. Sometimes there are huge jumps forward, as we mentioned in the timeline earlier on. Other times it's just a gradual, relentless process. And you probably also notice from that timeline how the process has gotten so much quicker in the last few years. And whilst we're about to look at country pop, it's gone way beyond country already. That band that we mentioned a second ago, The Devil Inside, basically passed for real back in early 2024. Now we're on to this ultra slick combination of country and folk influenced indie rock in the Velvet Sundown. I'd suggest that is thanks to perhaps the mainstreaming of bands like Mumford & Sons and even The Killers. These are like ultra produced indie. I'm not saying they're bad. I don't like Mumford & Sons. I mainly hate The Killers, but I have to admit back in the day I did dance them a few times. But the fact is they moved the Overton window of expectation when it comes to production and indie music. You know, the amount of control and processing and that was done on those bands changed what we were used to. It changed their ears. It changed their expectations. We all hated Mumford & Sons at the time. We didn't know why. It turns out it was foreshadowing because they were the four horsemen of the indie apocalypse. But and also, as I said, I think Nickelback probably makes up day one of AI training school. But these bands, which were real bands, but were going through these production processes that were becoming more and more contrived, more and more artificial, they were chipping away at our collective immune system for what is and what isn't authentically produced by a human. And that tide is still rising. And I think a big leap will happen again once the tech conquers that uncanny barrier on aggressive or nuanced vocals that we spoke about, and it will. I know we're like, oh, I'll be able to tell. I'm just telling you, you might be able to tell, but a vast, vast percentage of the population won't and probably won't care because their lives are too busy anyway, and so they will buy it thinking it's real. The tech will catch up. It just will. And I think there'll also probably be another jump once the software is able to replicate what we would call maybe intangible things like fragility and pain in vocals, things that are quite abstract. I think it will be a lot harder than we expect to identify that. So to just illustrate that, country is just a prime case, like case study in this. So what data were these country AI algorithms? We talked about the devil inside and deviate. What were they digesting? So a quick look, I think, and goodness knows, this is probably why I'm sick this week, but I did end up recruiting a friend, and that's a qualified term for which she inflicted on me, to put together a playlist of modern pop country hits. So we had Chicken Fried by the Zac Brown Band, lyrics about drinking cold beer, the love in my woman's eyes, a pair of jeans that fit just right, sings about stars and stripes, salute the ones that died, regarding the troops, freedom y'all. We had the song She Had Me at Heads Carolina by Cole Swindell, which is just the most improbably stupid fucking name in the world, which sounds to me, or at least starts to me, like if Avicii played at the Grand Ole Opry. Ultra processed, auto-tuned, slick as fuck, lyrics totally on the nose, Chevys, drive-ins. So anybody optimizing for success in this market, these are all big songs, sees a formula that AI can easily master. You add that to a growing trend of synthetic sounds feeling normal, and an audience that has been adapted, that is warped towards unnatural sounds. And then came the rise of bro country, which mixed rap production with stereotypical 90s country. So you were less reliant on real drum kits, on real instruments. You were more looking for effects and samples. That removed even the need for a room recording. So there's a video that you can check out on YouTube. It's by Signals Music Studio, a guy called Jake Lizio. He does a lot of stuff on there, and it's mainly a channel for it's music tuition. He teaches writers how to write music, but he hates pop country and bro country, and he decided to do a video to see if he could write it. And he wrote a track called Truck BFF as a challenge to himself. He starts off, it's brilliant. He needed a theme, and he did a bunch of research, and the theme suggestions that came up probably through AI were beer, pickups, blue jeans, girls, church, dusty roads, small towns, hometowns, clocking out, guns, and the flag. Right? So again, that all tallies with these big songs that were in that playlist I got. He starts with the main line to the chorus: my pickup truck is my best friend, gonna stick with me till the bitter end. I've said it before, now I'll say it again. A truck is a man's best friend. And he builds the track like musical Lego. The track is entirely passable. Like it or not, culturally elitist as it may sound or not, it is a genre very much regimented by tropes. These are boxes that can be ticked and must be ticked to succeed in a lot of cases. And the phenomenon of modern pop country production has conditioned people. I think it's overridden the uncanny barrier around those auto-tuned vocals. That's already been done for it. It's paved the way for this situation that we're in. We've unconsciously, as I say, weakened our own immune systems when it comes to identifying artificial compositions by an over-reliance on these synthetic aspects of music. So Deviate, Devil Inside, Deshaun Williams, they're all proof that this had already worked before Velvet Sundown. Velvet Sundown is just an example of that rising tide, where now they're feeling confident enough to go into slightly indie stuff, because the tech is improving. Literally, it's that easy.
Yeah.
You can now generate whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's very easy to generate music if you're using something like Suno. I have messed around with it, and it doesn't produce any results that I would ever want to put my name to. But, I'm a musician, so hey, I'm going to have a little bit more scruples, I suppose. But the thing that is kind of, to me, probably the most scary thing about that is the fact that every single day there's 22,000 songs uploaded to Spotify. If you're able to just type it into a box and create something out of a prompt. That becomes 24,000. It becomes 44,000. It becomes 104,000. It becomes 1,000,000 and 4,000. Do you know what I mean? And that just, there's no way this doesn't explode. You know, there's an exponential increase in how much AI music is going to be in our feeds as time goes on. And Spotify have said that they're not going to take it down. You know, they'll probably label it. Maybe.
Maybe. I mean, Deezer have been conscientious in that respect. They've been very quick to make it clear that stuff is AI.
Yeah.
Spotify, quite the opposite.
And as you said, the tools for creating are just going to get better. Right now, this is the worst it's ever been. It doesn't get worse from now on. Maybe in terms of the content and all that, but the tools to create it are going to become ever more sophisticated.
Yeah.
And according to the recent according to a software company called Umbrella, right? They create a tool which detects
Identifies it,
synthetic music. They're saying, like you said, AI music is not a one-off. They run an analysis on The Devil Inside and another artist called Aventhus.
That's even bigger than The Devil Inside, twice the audience.
1.2 million plays per month as the times of recording, and they don't have as many albums as The Devil Inside, but they do. I think the artist has
how many?
Maybe
was it
3.
19 albums? It's something ridiculous, isn't it? Devil Inside.
Yeah, like, it's crazy. But yeah, their analysis basically proved that these artists were using a mixture of sumo and refusion, which are basically 2 AI created music tools. The CEO told Music Business Worldwide, our detection system confirms that nearly every track by Aventhus and The Devil Inside is generated using Suno with some refusion influence. This isn't a one-off. AI music is flooding platforms at scale, and without these tools, such as the one they create, funnily enough, the industry has no visibility, no accountability, and no way to protect real creators. So, another interesting one I came across, and I've seen a few people on my Instagram sharing it, was a lad, I say lad, ostensibly a man, called Nick Hustles, which is kind of like a 70s classic Motown soul singer, but all the songs are like parodies. 50 Cent actually caught wind of it and filmed himself singing along in his car to a song called Why You N-Words Gotta Hate. And he's got 35 million Instagram followers, and he's just putting that out there. You know, just think about that for a second. That's pretty insane, right? So, yeah, I mean, some of the artists you found, and there was another article on Music Business Worldwide where they did an analysis of some of the artists they could find were able to approximately calculate that there was 4.1 million streams per month that they could see that have been generated by AI. And they didn't even talk about the artists that you talked about. You know, they had their own selection there. So who knows how many millions are getting generated there, you know? Your favourite band probably isn't even doing 100,000, right? I imagine they're doing less than 500,000.
Yeah.
So yeah, let that sink in, right? This problem is just going to get worse. And I don't want to be an AI doomer. I'm not an AI boomer. I'm not an AI doomer either. But there certainly exists a timeline in which AI starts to take over the charts. And when it starts to take over the charts, it will start to take over all the really popular and big Spotify curated playlists with all your big pop stars in it. As soon as it starts getting into that, then that's when the rot has really set in, and we kind of move to a point where apop is just another genre that people are enjoying willingly and without irony. It's the way I see it anyway.
Are you not worried? Are we just dinosaurs? Are we old men yelling at clouds?
No. I think even young folk will be concerned by this, surely.
I mean, I will say, whenever we discuss it, one thing that really strikes me as being particularly interesting about AI is how it works as a mirror. I mean, I think that was used actually in discussion of the Velvet Sundown, and the response from their PR, he was like, oh, it's a mirror. But it is a bit, and the things that it shows back at us, I think, are sometimes quite concerning. So I mentioned that Betrayed by This Town song, you know, as well as just the way that the AI character in that, the young girl, is depicted, the sexuality, but like the kind of quasi underage sexuality of that, you know, avatar. I think that's reflecting something back at us that we're maybe not acknowledging, because that's what we're putting out there. That's what we want to see, and this is what we want to hear, and this is the kind of messaging that young kids want in their pop music. I've been betrayed by this town. That's fucking school shooter patter. You know what I mean?
It's
That's
also punk rock patter. A lot of punk rock bands talk about the fact that they hate their town, they've been betrayed by their town, you need to get out of that town. You know, that's a fairly common rock trope. The boys are back in town, I've heard. So maybe not that band, but
I mean, the other thing is, I mean, I saw some glib comparisons. People that were defending it, saying that they were talking about the introduction of synthesizers way back and the impact that had on orchestral players. Apparently, I didn't know this until this week. There was a musicians' union strike against synthesizers in 1982, right? And it was triggered by a Barry Manilow tour of the same year, the UK, where he decided to use synthesizers to mimic orchestral sounds rather than the orchestras that he'd worked with in the previous tour. And the toys went out the pram. They were like, holy shit. So in May of that year, the union passed a motion causing outrage amongst the musical community against synthesizers. And few people were more upset than the actual synth players themselves, who then decided to form a rival organisation called the Union of Sound Synthesists to fight the reaction against synths. So there is that sense of like, yeah, there are historic similarities, but I don't think it's a parallel. I think that's a glib comparison, really, based on what we're talking about. I worry that we end up being that person on the in the street with the sandwich board saying the end is nigh. Certainly, we're warning people. We've discussed this today. We've discussed it in previous shows, and yet I'm aware that the progress is very unhindered. This is something that people don't get. Like, they swallow these shows, they listen to them, and they just think, oh, that's interesting, but it'll be fine. And you're like, well, it might be fine, but it'll be different. No amount of podcasting seems to have deterred the people that are pursuing AI in music ends, whether that's because they crave a scientific challenge, and some people really do, just whether it's good or bad, they don't consider the morality of it. It's like an Oppenheimer thing. It's like, there is something to be conquered, let's just do it and worry about the consequences after the fact. Others do it specifically for financial gains because they see it. The same goes for weapons. I mean, weapons are developed all the time for that very same reason. And there's that attitude of someone will invent it, so why not us? Becomes, if someone is going to invent it, we should be the ones that invent it so we control it. Because you don't want them, and you don't want them controlling it. They might do bad things with it. That's a very common attitude as well. None of that's going to change. The tech will come to pass as sure as night follows day. The tech will come to pass. This is coming. Mm-hmm. These are things, human nature, this technological advancement, it's all converging on this. So it comes down to not whether or not this tech will happen. It comes down to how that tech is controlled, regulated, and implemented. Can you get ahead of the game? Can you prevent a nuclear arms race in this field? Who are the authorities? And in this case, it's actually private companies most of the time who are regulating that. India today, as we spoke about, has absolutely no reservations about rolling this out as fast and as wide as possible, saying it represents a bold, brave new dawn for Indian pop culture. Does it? Really? Computers generating shit and putting things out of money? India today is quite happy to nail its colours to the mast, that is the bold new future for Indian culture. That's astonishing. That is the thing that really strikes me as the most alarming. Can we trust anybody to be a bulwark, when it comes to this? I don't know. Do you think we can?
I'm not sure. I mean,
I'm encouraged by Deezer. I was encouraged by the fact that they seem to have been very conscientious of labelling this stuff sharply in opposition to Spotify. You mentioned earlier on about the Velvet Sundown having low followings. They had less than 500 fans in Deezer when they had 500,000 on Spotify, because Deezer early on clearly marked them as being AI. And that absolutely played a part in it. But the thing is also, did Spotify take advantage of them? It's not a case of it just being a passive decision. Did Spotify not only not label it, but then help to promote it and help it get the success? Because ultimately that success benefits Spotify. We spoke about that years ago on the playlisting thing. All these AIs making ambient music. Ultimately, it actually benefits Spotify as well.
Absolutely. I mean, when we did our Play All episode back in October 2023, we spoke about how, Spotify's algorithm is a black box. So if you're able to juice your algorithmic power by buying plays, when it starts to pop up in actual real playlists that are just algorithmically generated but are for the most part legit, then that's the side effect, you know? It's the side effect of, yeah, I can juice it so hard that it's just going to start popping up. People will think it's natural. And like you said, 80% of folk are just not really going to notice, you know?
People are not tuned in.
Yeah,
People have
and-
got busy lives. You
and
know,
that's fine. You know, I get that. I get that. I totally get that. It's not what I look
it's a
for.
bummer, but
a
it's
bummer.
reality.
Yeah, it's reality. Yeah, you know, that's the way it is. So I think that this process just becomes, it just gets worse, I think, as time goes on. You know, the downer ending in this, I think this has got a downer ending. I don't think it's.
So you think music is doomed to be like a communal AI slop?
No, but this stuff is creeping onto the platform, like you said, like it or lump it. It's going to be there. It's going to end up becoming part of our cultural milieu, whether we like it or not. The tools for creating it are just going to become even more widespread and even more easy to use. And they're already pretty easy to use. I have used Suno for a little bit, and it is fairly easy to use. There's a lot of AI skeptics out there who believe that the gulf between human art and AI art is huge.
Yeah,
I think that we've proven that it is.
I think that's optimistic.
Yeah, it's not as big as a lot of folk would like to think that it is. Because, like you said, people are busy, or most people just simply don't have the capacity or even desire to engage with art on any kind of level which is meaningful, right? To them. Like, they just want something to fill the space, to help them turn their brain off, or to be a distraction. And you know what? That's fine. And creating art for that purpose is also totally fine. I have nothing. There's nothing wrong with that fundamentally, right? AI is competent, right? And if something is competent, in this case, whether it's art or not, well, it wins, right?
Mhm.
Competent AI created art wins.
It's efficient as well.
It's currently competent, you know.
I think, I think there's some for folks that are in the audience that are maybe trying to like take all that and apply it to real world impact. I think it will probably widen a wealth gap, because
Definitely.
you got to appreciate that the people behind the algorithms will make fortunes. They will not only make the same, if not more than the existing pop artists, but the infrastructure that it took to make that pop will be so diminished that the return will be so much bigger. Because whether or not we like it, and I don't like it, the likes of Taylor Swift and stuff has a massive universe of people behind her that also need to get paid. There's a whole ecosystem there that needs to get paid from Taylor Swift. That is not there with an AI artist.
One person, maybe
And
two.
Exactly. And if it gets to the point where firms have a monopoly on this to some extent, you know, that could get very problematic.
Yep.
And because the fact is, you know, with diminishing royalties going to real artists, things like tours will struggle, you know, especially if playlists are getting swamped by AI acts. The live music will change. Because, I mean, certainly live AI artists won't be able to play concerts. What I think you might get, which I've seen in a couple of cases, like the Indian cases, is that concerts become almost like movies. So they're like visually generated. They're lit. It's like, you know, they've started showing concerts at the cinema.
Mhm.
If you can imagine that, but just being fully generated, and then it progresses from that, where the concert just becomes like one big kind of feature film of elaborate visuals. You're going to cinemas to see the live show of Rue, you know, from Delhi, 24 years old, likes basketball shoes, whatever, you know, and instead it's just an AI generated film experience. Well, again, think about the money involved that's coming into that versus who actually had to get paid to make it. Not that many people.
Yep.
It completely changes the economy of music. Will it lead to a reset? It could. Will it self-correct? I suppose it could. We've kind of seen a bit of an example of self-correction in the form of vinyl. You know, the way people rejected digital media and turned to vinyl, albeit it was a subset of the community, not the majority. Will that, you know, we talked about the idealists, will the human need for connection in music, you know, suddenly make a strong recovery? Will there be a pushback against it? Because, you know, I just don't know. I feel like, yes, AI could hit a musical ceiling where people start to reject the fact that they're not responding to anything, but it's important to remember that so much about music now, because we no longer buy that much music, so much of music is dependent on the other aspects of the industry, soundtracks, adverts, incidental music in various sports programs. That is where a lot of the acts that are able to tour actually make most of their money now. And that is the thing that is most vulnerable. That's why those companies talked about, why are you doing classical music? You're like, because that's the one that's most used in adverts and films. Exactly. If you don't have to pay Hans Zimmer and you can get an AI that's trained on Hans Zimmer's entire catalogue, you'll do an AI trained on Hans Zimmer's catalogue and you will save yourself an awful lot of money. But Hans Zimmer and his 50 writers that work for him won't actually get that money. And certainly neither will anyone beyond Hans Zimmer who might be a risk. The studio will know we've got a sure thing by doing this versus taking a gamble on some upcoming artist. Suddenly you realise that this thing that's keeping a lot of these people going now is gone. Why would you pay a band for music on a sports program if you can just stick some random AI music over the back of it? Is anyone actually listening to the music behind the goals montage?
I know.
Not very often.
Yeah. Well, for me, that's the biggest issue. You know, this presents a whole new way for artists to get screwed over by labels and other commercial entities, right? The music industry has been exploiting artists for over 200 years. We've spoken about this at length in many episodes of this podcast, whether it goes back to the invention of sheet music and lax copyright laws, whether it's Tin Pan Alley, whether it's Payola, you know, whether it's exploitative contracts, whether it's poor royalty deals, all of that stuff, right? That's been happening for 200 plus years, and this is just another thing to add on top of that, right? The one thing back then, though, which was always the bulwark against it, is the fact that artists could create, right? Your managers and agents, your owners, representatives, your pluggers, pushers, and listeners, writers, music writers, you know, journalists, they couldn't create. Well, they probably could create, but they couldn't create on the scale that was required, or with the authenticity, whatever that means, that could connect with the mass populace, right? The game's different now because this proves that you don't even need the artist anymore, right? You just need a person that's really good at writing a prompt that can create something out of nothing that sounds 80% of the way there, that most people could go, that's kind of catchy, I'm going to listen to that a little bit more. And that's all we need, you know? So I think we're looking at a future where the artist will matter less and less and less for a lot of people. I do optimistically think you're right in saying that there might be a kickback against that. I really hope there is. But I think for the vast majority of folk, it just won't be something that will even enter their brain. How many times have you been in normal conversation with somebody that's not involved in music, that have really odd opinions about how music works? It's just a normie opinion, though, right? They don't really have to think about the inner workings of it. You know, they'll go to the Ed Sheeran gig and they'll think that's the best thing ever, or they'll go to see Taylor Swift and think that's the best thing ever, but they won't really fully understand what that means for smaller artists who you've just splurged all that money on, that you could go, do you know what? I mean, we've spoken about this endlessly as well.
I'm
like,
oh God, I'm reluctant to do it, but there's a real, I should maybe just get out the road. There's a real I told you so moment here for me, right? AI, if you imagine a world where the tech appeared overnight, AI music could not have happened in 1974, right? Because you had people who still expected music to be sincere and flawed and full of nuance and complicated and innovative and challenging, right? One of the reasons that I've been such a curmudgeon for so long is because for 20 years, certainly I'm in a professional music life, inverted commas, I've watched that be eroded and music become pure commodity, music become flattened down, the innovation be taken away. Things like even nuance. Your Amy Winehouse even is gone now. You're replaced by synthetic voices, people who do vocal takes that aren't even in the right key, and it's all just fixed later. It's fine. We'll fix it in the computer. We'll press the button. We'll press the Katy Perry button. And I'm not meaning to pick on Katy Perry. She's certainly not the only one. But that has been an erosive process. And the problem was it was leading to this. If we hadn't conditioned ourselves, nobody came down from space and conditioned us. This wasn't some Illuminati plot. We conditioned ourselves because we're fucking mugs as a species. We allowed ourselves to erode all these things that were important. Real artistic connection, humanity, authenticity. Mm-hmm. So now we're left in a situation where we have to hope there is a resurgence and a passion for authenticity as a pushback against this. We grow to embrace flaws. We grow to embrace innovation even more so than before, because it's the one thing that the tech still struggles with. Mm-hmm. And on the other side of that, the other thing we really need to hope is that there are bulwarks against that, that the likes of sites like Deezer stand up and do things like that, marking things as being like, this is AI. That needs to be flagged up. That should have been the case way back when Photoshop became a thing, because God knows body image and various aspects of that have led to so much damage in the way of eating disorders and things. We're on the brink of a musical equivalent of that, where we can't tell reality from fucking fantasy images of people's six-pack abs. It's not real. That is not how they sound. This music, nobody touched that. We need to have some sort of guard in there now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, for a lot of that, we're putting our faith in either we're like, oh, let's get the state to do it, and then bitch about the government not doing it, which seems like a bad idea to get the government involved in art in any way. And the alternative is that corporations do it, and goodness knows they're not, intrinsically the most ethical of organizations.
Yeah, I mean, if corporations are doing it, then if that's a conclusion, that's a conclusion that I totally abhor, and we should all abhor, right? Because as you said, or as you were hinting at, authenticity and creativity actually matters. It's a core part of the human condition. Whether you're knitting a jumper or writing a tune, an expression is required, right? If that expression is completely removed and just commodified and sold to the public, then are we really any better than machines? No.
We
right?
smell worse.
We smell.
I certainly smell.
We generally smell.
Been in this
I don't think
room
you
for
can
a while.
smell right now. I don't think you can smell.
No,
right
I can't smell a damn thing, but you can smell me. Thanks for going on that journey. I'm definitely going to need a strong drink after that.
Yes, me too.
But hopefully we handled it in a sensible manner. We're not just being too pessimistic. It's a real issue. I think the inevitability is something that people need to come to grips with, though.
Yeah, apop is just going to grow, and that's where we're going to be in the next couple of years. We're going to be talking more and more about how this is just a plague, right? I remember when we did the episode on algorithms.
Slave to the
ago.
algorithm.
Yeah. There was a discussion around how AI music was going to become a thing.
Yeah.
And I think I was very optimistic about the fact that it wouldn't become a thing. A few years on, I'm the exact opposite now. I'm totally the exact
Told you I was
opposite.
trying not to do. I told you so.
And hey, man, like AI, I think is useful, right? It's useful in creating this video version of this, right? Because I'm using a tool which is saving me hours of work by doing automatic cuts and transcribing it, right? And I can look at a transcription, I can find something and turn that into a social clip. It's dead easy, you know what I mean? It's literally saved me hours of work that I can do myself, but I just simply don't have time because of life.
And hopefully,
right?
as I said, there's a couple of examples in there at least that we're acknowledging there are good uses of this. It's not inherently bad. Nothing is inherently bad that I can think of. It's the application of it.
Absolutely.
And the abuse of it.
And this application right now is bad, and it's not even getting abused yet. It will get abused at some point in the future, and it will
hyper-capitalism, man.
It'll just be muck, total muck at all times.
There you go, folks.
Down the round, I'm afraid. Can't send you away with positive vibes this week, I'm afraid.
How about we top that by talking about like fascism or something next week?
That's very on brand for us, to be fair. So yeah, let's do that. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell us what you think. And if you want to go the extra bit further, you can subscribe on Patreon.
Yeah, subscribe. Come on, help us out here and help the bands out. If you want to join the record club, we'll send you some absolutely smashing music.
Link for that is in the bio if you're on YouTube, or it's patreon.com/unsungpod. If you're not, we will see you next week or 2 weeks maybe, depending on how time goes, with something that smells a bit weird.
Special.
Yeah, special.
Take care of yourselves.
Bye.